the artist, and then maybe he can tell us a little bit about himself,
Yeah.
and then we can go from there.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Well, Jeff, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Okay. So I think some of the correspondences that we've had noted that I live in Athens.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone knows that I work at Ohio University. There's a book publisher that I work for called Ohio University Press. And
Yeah.
I'm the sales manager for the press.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like my full-time day job.
Hmm.
I make these collages, and I've been doing this for, it's been about over 20 years. And there goes our little map. That's kind of been my hobby. It's, you know, I wouldn't call it a job or a part-time job, but I do spend a lot of time during the course of a week after work, whenever I can. A lot of times it is sort of relegated to the weekends, but
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of when I am able to fit it in. And if I'm not actually making it, I do enjoy, you know, like reading about art, checking out books from Ohio libraries about art.
Mm-hmm.
I have an Instagram account and I follow other artists. And, you know, there's kind of an interesting development in, you know, social media with like hashtags for collage, collage illustration, collage, contemporary collage. And so you can kind of, you know, pick up a real international scene from just paying attention to social media like that. So that's been something that I've done just the last 2 or 3 years with social media.
Okay. Well, how and when did you get started doing this?
I started, the key moment for me was when I was in college. I took an art history class, and it was modern art. And I was always struck by this, you know, reference to an artist named Kurt Schwitters, who's from Hanover in Germany. And in right around World War I, he was one of these Dada artists who started, I mean, I think other people had done collage before, but he started doing the kind of collage that I like, which is, you know, he would find old tickets that people had thrown away at the railway station, litter on the streets, that kind of like found paper stuff. And he would incorporate those into these like compositions that became, they're very tiny. I've seen a lot of them at different museums, and they're about the size of a postcard.
Yeah.
So that stuck with me. And what I remember is I started collecting just crap, you know, like little stuff, and I didn't know what to do with it. I just had it in an envelope at an apartment that I used to live in. And I just kind of, I carried it around, and I would throw stuff that looked interesting to me in it. It might be like an airline ticket stub, or I don't know, just things that I encountered. And I remember one day, this is like well after college, I was like, what the heck am I doing with this stuff? And I remembered Kurt Schwitters, and I thought, maybe I should start like making stuff with this stuff instead of just like leaving it in an envelope. And I think that was the moment that I put, you know, 2 and 2 together. And this was in the late 90s. And I started making things. The first thing I remember making was I made a collage of the US flag for my mom for like a birthday or Mother's Day or something. And it was pretty big. It was like a poster size type of thing. I remember like looking for all sorts of magazines and, any kind of red, white, or blue snippet that I could cut out, I used. And then I just put it on this, the format for the flag. And, but from there, it was mainly like just smaller scale stuff with things that I just happened to find. And then I became kind of what's the word? Like a hoarder. Like I started to like have, I wouldn't say problems, but I just started like looking for stuff. And it included not just paper, but I would find like the town that I lived in would have these spring cleanups. And so I would pick up like all sorts of just junk from people's yards that they were getting rid of, thinking that I could make like not just paper collages, but assemblages, like sculptures out of this stuff.
Yeah.
I think your previous exhibit, the guy who collected stuff from the Ohio River, I'm not totally sure, but it seemed like that kind of like finding objects and putting other things together, that kind of became a problem because I couldn't keep up with the cool stuff that I was finding. I mean, let's face it, this country gets rid of a lot of stuff. We have too much. And so if you have a guy like me who's like, oh, that looks cool, I could do something with that. So at one point I just stopped and said, paper is what I need to limit myself to.
Yeah.
So that's, that was late 90s and I've been doing it ever since.
Now, I can't remember where I first saw your work. It must have been in a show somewhere. And we had an exhibit at that time, and that was quite a few years ago. And then I asked you to come back for a group show that I did with people who were doing different things with paper. I remember them being a lot smaller than the works that are hanging in the gallery now. Do you want to address that? Is this new that you have expanded them to a larger size? Yeah,
it's new. Trying to remember. Well, I know exactly what happened. I have two galleries in Ohio have some of my artwork. One is up in Cleveland. And one day I went in with, I'll show you real quick. This is the kind of like notebook that I do most of my work in. So, this is a standard thing. And I took a couple of those notebooks up to show these gallery owners. And they liked my work. They had similar pieces in their collection, but they told me that they thought that their audience, their market, needed something bigger for their homes, I guess. And they asked me if I could do larger scale collages. And at first I was like, that's like I didn't really necessarily want to feed. I mean, I want to sell artwork, but I didn't really want to bend or cave into like, stuff that, that was just going to look good in somebody's living room, so to speak. Yeah. But I actually thought, I've seen murals, I've seen a lot of advertisements, for example, from the Ohio Arts Council. And I've been curious in the past to think, oh, I wonder if I could do a mural. That's a lot of the stuff that I've seen is like, University of Akron or Kent State has this project and it's going to be a mural. We're looking for artists. And I had wondered before if I was able to do something that large. So this kind of gave me an opening to experiment and see if it was possible. And so I went ahead and I got one of these, which is just a, poster sized notebook that I got from Michael's or Joanne Fabrics or someplace like that. And I opened it up and basically dealt with like the thing that writers deal with, which is writer's block. just looking at
Yes.
the white page and wondering, what am I going to do? And because all my previous stuff really, and that, it was like, I wouldn't say a rut, but it was like kind of like decades of work, was all very much, like an image from a magazine that was smallish would look good in one of my smaller scale collages. But if I put that same image into this poster, it was going to get lost. So I had to look for larger images, or larger sections of color, or I had to really think about, a lot of small things that would add up to look kind of cool. So I did that, and I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was a different, some people say like you use different muscles. It was like using different creative muscles to kind of think about the process. And that's what led to the pieces that are at OU Southern.
Oh, okay. Okay. You had mentioned Switters, and talked a little bit about his collages. Are you familiar with he started turning his entire house into a three-dimensional Merzbow, yes. And in fact, I think he even bought the house next door and started to expand it into that. I figured you would have been aware of that, but it just, I'm not suggesting you do that.
Hold on a sec. I have, so it's kind of a coincidence. I did not get this for our Zoom talk today, but I got through OU Libraries, through the fabulous Wonder of Ohio link, this pretty new book called Poisoned Abstraction, Kurt Schwitter's Between Revolution and Exile.
Oh, okay.
And I was just looking at it the other day. I'm going to see if I can really quickly find an image. That Merzbow is photographed in here, and it was destroyed, unfortunately, during World War II. The British bombed, I guess it was Hanover, where he lived, and they bombed this incredible piece of architecture. And I've seen the photos of it, and it just looked like, wow. I mean, if it was still around, I think I might have had a trip to Germany by now to actually see it. I probably won't be able to find it here in time, but anyhow, yeah, I don't know how he did it. I mean, it looks like it was a real architectural interior design type thing. Here it is. I'll see if people can see it.
Yeah.
So that's like the interior. And it just looked like really a cool space to walk through, full of nooks and crannies. And yeah, I mean, here's my place. It's just the typical like pieces on the wall, framed pieces. Nothing as exotic as that.
Well, I know you haven't seen my work, but mine's kind of bizarre. And I have one in which I have 100 little airplanes that require putting a screw in the wall. And my wife said, "You're not putting 100 screws in the wall."
I have over here on the side, I have a, do you know what a pachinko game is from Japan?
No.
It's like an arcade game from like the 1960s.
Oh,
and
okay.
I think people would go in and they would put in like money, and then you flip a switch and a ball bounces around these little prongs, and I guess you might make some money. I found this pachinko machine at an Amish auction up in Northern Ohio in Holmes County. And I bought it thinking that I was going to install it in a wall, like actually cut open our wall and put it in so that it was flush. Yeah. And my wife and my son both convinced me that that was a really bad idea. So now it's just, sitting on top of a desk. But, so yeah, you got to be careful when you're dealing with your real estate.
Are there some other artists that inspired you as well?
Yeah, definitely. Probably the two biggest ones besides Kurt Schwitters are Robert Rauschenberg,
Yeah.
abstract. I don't know if, I guess he was abstract expressionist / pop, from the, mainly his stuff from the late 50s, early 60s, but
Yeah.
his career went on for decades after that. But those early things that he did, I forget what they were called.
Combines.
Combines, exactly. The combines that was a big influence on me for many, many, many years, and to a degree still are. And then there's a guy named Lance Letcher, and he is an artist, contemporary artist who lives in Austin, Texas. And
Oh,
I think he trained as a sculptor at the University of Texas. And at one point, somehow he got into collage. And I think he is like the modern master of collage artwork. And I mean, those are the two big ones. But I find inspiration from a lot of different, artists. Yeah, painters and sculptors as well.
yeah. I thought you would say Rauschenberg. Even though his work
He
isn't,
was like a printmaker also, right? And I'm
Yeah,
not that.
yeah, he would use screens, like
Screen
silk
printer, yeah.
screen, and screen that paint onto the canvas. So
Yeah, and he did another technique where he would like he would do image transfers where he would, I think, put some sort of like rubbing alcohol or something, and then like rub it with a coin, and then the transfer would happen.
yeah,
And I've tried that before, and it's never worked out for me. I must be doing something wrong. So I just use a pair of scissors and I cut things out.
I did. I was influenced by Rauschenberg too, in terms of two-dimensional work when I was an undergraduate, and did those transfers from magazines and newspapers, whatever. But they have switched to soy-based ink, and so the turpentine has not worked for me.
Oh, maybe that's the issue.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
wondering. Go
go ahead.
ahead. No, I was just going to ask. I didn't want to hog questions. I just wondered if anybody else had a question.
I have a
Hello?
question. I'm having trouble with my video, so my apologies. But you mentioned earlier about like kind of getting what you consider to be like writer's block when you're just staring at a blank page. How do you overcome that, or how do you decide what pieces you're going to use? Obviously you have to kind of amass all these pieces from different books, magazines, labels and things like that. It must be overwhelming to look at it all and say, what am I going to use?
Yeah. It's always an issue. And so one of the things is what I've often seen writers say that they do, which is you just go at it every day and you just don't stop and you just try, and maybe you'll fail, but you go back the next day or the next hour and you keep at it. This guy I mentioned, Lance Letcher, the contemporary collage artist, I read something that he said once, which was the key thing to start any piece is to collect the colors, the kind of pattern, mainly it was the tone, the colors of pieces that he wanted to kind of use that would inspire a piece. One thing that I do that helps is I'm going to try to show. So let's see here. Hold on. I got to move that little kids thing. In the corner behind that is a pile of paper. I'll show you. So I have like piles like that. That is a box, and then there's like books on top of that and other papers on top of that, all
Yeah.
over the place. Behind me is our dining room. There's more piles in there, and then our basement. I don't even want to show anybody that. So what I will sometimes do is just like like pick something from the bottom of that pile and put it on top. And then that will be like, it's like fresh inspiration. The other thing is I go often to like library book sales. I try not to pay for any of this stuff. I try to find everything. I go to the OU recycling, and usually anything that I find that's new to my quote collection is like, oh, wow, I can do something with this. And I start like laying it down. And that's the last thing I'll say about that. Sometimes it's just, you just start laying stuff down, and you move things around, and oftentimes something will click, and I'll be like, that's where I want to go. That's, I guess, one of the things that has kept me interested in it as long as I have been, and that is, it's always like a discovery. And so that blank page is always like a challenge. It's an obstacle. And sometimes I hate it, and sometimes the result sucks. And I'm like, that's garbage. But it's always great when I come up with something that I'm really happy with. And that happens with regularity the more I keep going at it. And that is a rewarding thing about doing artwork.
Yeah. When you were talking a little bit about the process, it reminded me again of Rauschenberg. When somebody asked him how he makes his work, and he said, well, you take something, you do something to it, then you do something else to it, then you do something else to it. And that's very much a collagist sort of way of thinking, that you're assembling, you're putting this thing together. I think that that's one of the things that attracts me to collage, is because for the majority of my involvement in art, even when it was things like cast metal, I would cut a lot of things out, make components, and then put them together. So I guess that kind of thinking is one of the things that attracts me to collage. Now, I noticed you must do a lot of trolling for old books and stuff, because I saw quite a few of them that used very old illustrations and books. In fact, a few book covers you put into them.
Yeah. So actually, I'm going to show you. I want to show a couple of pieces that are pretty recent. One, to address your question, Dennis.
Yeah.
This one I did over the weekend. And
Okay.
this is a cover from a magazine that was kind of like, it's not porn, but it was 1945. And it is like one of these like titillating, scantily clad lady magazines that were marketed to soldiers. And I found that at a yard sale in Wellston, Ohio, at the Wellston Coal Festival about 15 years ago. And where I'm going with this is your comment about Rauschenberg doing stuff. one of the problems I face regularly is that sometimes like an image is so cool looking and beautiful and nice on its own that I feel like I want to use it, but I also want to preserve it. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is a truth about making collage, for the most part, is that you really do need to mess around with that image. You need to tear it up. You need to crumple it. You need to put something on top of it. You need to use only a section of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's someone else's work. You know, it's Wink magazine or whoever the graphic designer was that put that together.
Right.
Although, you know, sometimes I get away with it by like using it in its entirety and joining it with all these other things. And you have these kind of interesting juxtapositions. But I do think that to take like complete ownership of a piece, it involves destroying what it used to be. And really, like, the other phrase that you hear a lot is make it new. And so I feel like one of my goals or obligations is to really take ownership of whatever that original piece might have been. So it's hard to do because sometimes I'll come across like these old labels from these cans, or, you know, everyone's seen these things like old fruit boxes that, you know, contain oranges or apples or grapefruits. And the color of these graphics and the images themselves is perfect. You don't want to touch it. It's just like, sometimes, you know, I've started to like put things aside that I just like and appreciate on their own. But every once in a while I'll be like, I got to destroy that. I've got to tear it apart. So that is a real a test, I find, when I encounter this stuff.
And you say you've been doing this how long?
Sometime in the late 90s, like 98, 97.
Okay, so you've
Over
had
20 years.
Had quite a few years to collect things. Your wife must be very patient.
She's totally patient, especially because my quote studio is our kitchen table. And she's a cook. And so, and you know, she has a daycare, and so there are kids that use the table. So basically my, like, I used to have a place in our basement where I would work, and that became a kid's, like a daycare room. So I had to move out of there, fix up the room. And now my stuff is in this other kind of storage room. And it's a little, you know, it's kind of a basement, not very pleasant to hang out in and work. So I ended up taking stuff in like portions up here. And then I would work on them, you know, underneath the light on the kitchen table. Usually once, you know, our son and sometimes my wife have gone to bed. And that's a little bit of peaceful time for me to mess around. But then you know, at the end of the night or whatever the session is, I need to clean up, get everything off, put it away. And it's like a cycle. I will let things accumulate, like in that pile right there. And it usually takes us having friends over for me to like, okay, I got to get this stuff back in the basement.
Yeah.
We have a question from one of the viewers. She wants to know, Barb Costas Biggs has asked, what are the things in everyday life that keep you inspired? And what or who do you go to when you're feeling stuck?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think you know, I showed that book of the Kurt Schwitters. I'm just gonna, I see here randomly. I really do mean when I say I use Ohio Link. So this is Sophie Tauber Arp, who was married to Hans Arp. And there's a show on, I think, at the Met or MoMA right now with her stuff. Edward Munch, of course, the Scream fame. This is actually probably from Alden Library in Athens. So I find, like, from day to day, I'll look at other artists' works and read about them. And a lot of times that will get me some a push in a direction. And same thing about, you know, I never want to, sometimes I will imitate another artist's stuff, but I usually look for what is my angle, like what would I do different so that I can take some sort of ownership of that, you know. I don't, you know, I'm looking outside right now. I like the outdoors, but I wish sometimes that I would find more inspiration from like going out into my environment. I've thought about, I have another kind of a friend who's an artist in Athens. She is she paints homes and like buildings, structures, barns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I've wondered about, you know, doing that. I don't know if she works like on site outdoors or if she takes photographs, but I've wondered, you know, maybe I should try that with collage, you know, go and collage a tree or a home or you know, I like cityscapes a lot. And when I was down in Ironton to drop off my artwork, I went into the city and spent a lot of time taking pictures. I'm a huge fan of the Rust Belt. And I love decay. I love urban decay in a big way. Not that I do that in my artwork, but I do that, like I carry a camera with me often, and I like that's a daily inspiration, signs, old signage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you guys have a couple of furniture buildings downtown.
Yeah.
And one of them is all done up in black and white. You know what I'm talking about?
I think I do. Yeah.
And then there's another one just down the street from it that has a huge hanging sign on the side of the building. Mm-hmm. That is one of the things that that inspires me. Words, language, signs. So sometimes I'll a phrase, like if I'm reading a book or if I'm listening to the radio, I'll think of just some random phrase, and I do these. I don't think I have any here, but I do word collages also, where it'll just be nothing except some phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Do
So
you have a filing system as far as your materials that you collect? I would be like, if you know you're working on a project and you know, oh, I've got this one picture that would be perfect in here, but you can't find it. Like, how do you keep track of where you have everything? I should
be better. I'll say that. My system right now is actually strangely kind of like a chronological system based on memory. I do have like, there's a cabinet where I keep magazines. So that's just like, I know, like if I want an old magazine, that's the place I go. There's another like a book rack that has just old books. And so if I want end papers or, you know, like books with foreign language in it, that's the place that I'll go. And then I have like this thing back here, which is just like this hodgepodge of stuff that I've found. And I guess it's not there, but like in my dining room behind me, there's a box that has a bunch of old Southeast Asian studies stuff, like magazines and political posters and stuff. And I just like, I recognize the box. So if I'm looking for like something that has, you know, that is stuff from that box, I just look for that box. It's a strange, it's a poor system. I've seen other artists who are like, they have a labeling system. It'll say like heads, and it'll like every head that they cut out from a magazine, or yellow, you know, they'll do it by color. And they have these like filing systems. And I sometimes like drool over the thought of having something so convenient. But I don't. I just throw stuff around And like I was saying earlier, sometimes that provides me with inspiration. I'll be like, oh, I remember this. I found that 7 years ago. And then I'll just, you know, but if I'm looking for a certain thing, you know, then that's trouble.
Yeah,
Because when am I going to find that? But it does send me on these little adventures to find stuff, which is a huge waste of time, but it's also, it takes up time, and I find it time well spent sometimes.
Or you might stumble across something else you like better too.
That's often, yeah. So what's that word? Serendipity. That
Serendipity.
plays into my work for sure.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know that in my personal work, I go from order to disorder, and then I've got to stop when I do a new project and try to get some semblance of order so I can start something new. And then it goes back into disorder again after a couple months. And so it's constantly back and forth. And my wife being a librarian and being very linear in her thinking, I think Barb can relate to this. It drives my wife, her thinking is A, B, C, D. For me, I'm a very nonlinear person, and I go A, B, H, I, J, X, Y, Z, and it drives her crazy, the way I think sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a life lesson right there. And it's also kind of like that yin and yang, you know, there's order and disorder, and there's logic and insanity. And, you know, if you ride the edge of that, I think is you can create some interesting things, because sometimes it's, you know, something that looks orderly, but it's just off a little bit, makes it really interesting. Like the Marilyn Monroe mole, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Barbara had a question up, but it flashed on my screen and left real quick. It said,
No, I was just gonna say, Dennis, that I'm not nearly as organized as Janet. I'm a librarian, but I'm also a poet, remember? So I'm a, you know, my mind is all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. Jan's always been that way though. So I think becoming a librarian was just a very natural path for her to take. So
Poetry is a good, you know, I think all these creative, you know, how you approach pieces, whether it's writing a poem, I don't know about novel. I've tried, you know, I've experimented with poetry in my past. And it seems similar to me, the way I, you know, get inspired, and also the way I'll write something down and then dwell on it a little bit, rewrite it. And then sometimes it develops into a poem. I mean, that you need to go back to and shave and edit and cut down. Sometimes it becomes wild and, you know, goes on for pages. And I think it compares to the way I approach artwork. You know, I find these pieces, lay them out, set them, move them around, and you know, sometimes discard them altogether before I glue it down and call it done.
okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you know when you're done?
Boy, that's another one that you read about all the time. The thing that I always think about is this writer Raymond Carver would say something like he knew his short stories were done when it came down to just like deciding whether or not to take out a comma or leave it in.
Oh.
And I think, I don't know. You just, it's one of those strange answers. Like, you just know, it just feels right. There are times when I'll just like tinker and think like, oh, that I could add something to that, and it might go on for another hour or two or another few days. But there's a certain point where you feel like that looks good. That's what I want.
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
just a feeling, you know?
So you don't start off with a set image in your mind at all? It's just simply exploring with the material?
Yeah, that's a good topic. I won't take too much time on that, but most of the time it's very random. Like I just sort of like put stuff down and stuff happens. But
Yeah.
I do like the idea, and I do appreciate that vision that some artists have for like drawing a sketch. I see a lot of this with I follow an artist she's a commercial artist, a Japanese American woman who does like covers for like the New Yorker, lots of other like probably albums and advertisements. But you know, her work is, she shows her work on Instagram quite a bit. She will get the job, I guess, and then sketch out ideas and then do another sketch that's kind of like a refined version before she starts to really become like the piece really then, you know, she'll add color and she uses India ink to kind of ink everything out like a cartoonist or comic artist. And her work, I'm really impressed with, like, just somebody who has like an idea for what they want to do and then they do it. That happens with me every so, maybe 6% of the time. I like that idea, but it goes back to what Tina was saying. The issue is then if I do that, then it means I need to find that art.
Yeah.
that like will fulfill the vision, and finding the art when you're a collector like me is a problem.
Yeah.
So let me think here. I have one that I did recently. Oops, wrong. Here it is. Let me just see if I can show you. So this one was kind of like, it's just a portrait.
Oh, okay.
Used from end papers from books that I found in a recycling bin for the
Okay.
pants and the shirt. So those are like from the like end papers from a 19th century textbook.
Yeah.
And then this head and the arms are from what do you call the letterpress printing, that, you know, some company that makes posters that I visited them in Indiana a couple of years ago. And I ended up taking a bunch of their posters that were basically mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. I had this vision for this, a portrait of a person and doing it with different colors.
Yeah.
And then after I came up with the figure, I decided to do like other background stuff.
Okay.
So that's one rare example of where I have an idea and then I'll fulfill it. Most of the time it's very random.
Yeah. I know a lot of artists, and I know I do this. I might have this image in my head of the piece that I want to do, and I'll make rough sketches of it. But when it comes down to executing it, things change. You make different decisions. I didn't think of this, or whatever. So
Yeah, that's a fun part of that journey, I guess, is that you just discover things along the way.
I have one more question, if that's okay. What kind of adhesive do you use? Does it depend on what you're actually laying down? Like in the case of some of the ones you've got on display, you've got actual book covers that are fastened on. I would imagine you'd have to have some pretty hefty glue for that.
Yeah, no, I have also behind me in that room, I have probably maybe 4 or 5 different types of glue, paste, stuff that lately I actually use this very common white glue called Mod Podge.
yeah.
For years and years, I used, it's called matte medium.
Mhm.
And another a friend of mine who was an artist recommended that. But the problem I found with matte medium, which is really good for like archival, keeping things like safe and protected, is that for the, like you mentioned, book covers, it's not strong enough to hold really heavy paper. And so I would find like sometimes if I use that on a thick paper, it would peel off or it would come apart. And I'm like, that's not going to hold. So Mod Podge really seems to work for most of the stuff that I do. But I have like this stuff called nori, which is like a Japanese, probably a rice-based glue. I've made wheat paste before, which is a Kurt Schwitter's. You just use flour, water, and a little bit of sugar, heat it up on the stove, and then it holds pretty well. The concern I have about that is like, I think like critters might
Yeah.
enjoy eating it. I'm just going to turn my camera for a sec. I have one piece on the wall that is right there that I sewed not too long ago. So this piece here is it's cardboard, and I sewed it with like really thick twine. And then this is a leather dog leash that I also sewed on. I don't know if you can see, there's like an X pattern on it with another kind of a string. And then there's a piece of fabric upholstery also found in an OU recycling bin that I sewed all around. And then there's this old antique grater, like a cheese grater, that I used wire. I sewed it onto wire. And that's on the back of an old Hudipole, like Hudipole Brewing from Cincinnati. I found a big old Hudipole box, and then I would like, somehow I sewed through the box. So those are my ways of adhering things to sewing and gluing. And, it's usually a pretty standard glue. But I do want this stuff to last, and hold up. I found like also from libraries, like the old, when libraries used to put the card, what do you call the card catalog, library cards in the back of books. I think sometimes they would use not rubber cement, but something like, or maybe it is rubber cement. And from me searching and finding that stuff over the years, I've seen that stuff does not last for generations. It dries up and then it leaves an ugly stain. Although sometimes I've used those stains in my art as a piece of the artwork.
Yeah, in fact, speaking of stains, I saw that you have experimented a little bit with some mark making using iron or steel on a couple of them. In fact, one of them is, and the walnut pigment that you made yourself. Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, there's one piece in the show. There's a couple pieces in the show that have rust prints, and one is that walnut piece. It's if you go in and look at the art, there's one that's just a bunch of dots, and I think that's what I called it, is dots. That is the result of a piece of metal that I found somewhere. I can't even remember where. That it was easy to rust. And I would help it rust by adding vinegar and laying it outside for overnight. And then it would leave a often beautiful rust print on a piece of paper that was like orange from the rust, the iron. But to kind of hold that, to quote, fix that rust so that it didn't smear, like when I would eventually glue it, I found this other combination. A couple of years ago, I started finding black walnuts in my neighborhood and up at the ridges at OU.
Oh, yeah.
And I had read somewhere that you could make pretty nice brown ink from walnuts. So I read a little bit online, boiled a bunch of walnuts, boiled it down so that it was nice and, thick and juicy. And then I would paint in the rust with the walnut dye. And it really, like, the combination was awesome, really dark, kind of a little bit marbleized in some cases. And it also held the rust in place. It changed the color, but then I could like glue over it and it wouldn't like smear.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I do. I have a bunch of rust in a box in our backyard, and sometimes I'll go out and make a print and then incorporate that in a collage.
Yeah. It's very rich color.
Yeah.
The one that especially I remember with the walnut pigment in it. Now, was it the whole walnut or just the shells? Which part gave off that?
It's the whole walnut, and what I've read is that it's the green, that green casing that really gives the dye its brown depth.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true, but that's what I tried to find. And then I would just boil all of the whole thing, and then eventually it falls apart, and I have to strain it a little bit to get like the ink that's kind of clean. It doesn't have a lot of little particles in it.
Yeah. Now you've made your own pigment. Have you ever thought about making your own paper?
One year at OU, I took a class. Mary Manusos was the, I don't know if anyone knows her. I think she's retired from OU now, but she's a paper making artist. And I think she makes art out of the paper that she makes. I took one of her classes. I'm actually also on the board of Paper Circle up in Nelsonville, which is a craft paper making group, but I don't really do that myself. I totally enjoyed that class and had a fun time making paper with stuff like I found out in nature, not to mention with stuff like the dryer lint from our dryer, or old jeans where I ruined one of my wife's blender by trying to blend fabric. Anyhow, I've tried that, but
so result.
The results are cool. It's just like, to really do it, I think you need that studio. You need that, I forget what they call the blender thing when you're making paper, and I just don't have the space for that. Yeah. So I've found papers is the way I go.
Yeah. Gina, do you or anyone else have any questions?
We have just a few more minutes left, so if anyone has anything else to ask or add.
This is my cat. You might have a question. I hope people get to see the exhibit, and I appreciate you guys having it posted or hung. And Dennis, thanks for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
At OU Southern. And unfortunately, I don't know anyone down around Ironton besides you all here in this meeting that I can recommend to go see it. But it's always nice to have art, out hanging someplace, and hopefully someone will see it. Maybe someone will try to make a collage, and that would be great.
Well, Michelle's been working on collage, so I hope that maybe today's given her some inspirations too.
For sure. That's why I'm asking about glue and everything. Like, what do you no? I started last year, and I think we connected on Instagram. I followed you.
Really?
you follow, or I don't know if you follow me back, but you liked one of my things, so you
Oh,
saw
really?
it. But,
Oh, cool.
yeah, but it's really inspiring. Your pieces are great.
Good job.
Always love seeing, you know, we could all have the same exact images and we'd all do something completely different with them if we were sat down at a table with some glue and scissors. So I think that's just really cool.
Yeah. Have you ever done like a collage workshop or anything?
No.
No?
Oh,
Okay.
that's an idea.
Yeah, I've never done that. I've always worked kind of solo, but I see that there are these communities of like they call them collage collectives.
Mhm.
You know, Brooklyn and Paris and, you know, Phoenix, Arizona and wherever. And they sometimes get together, like there was a recent gathering in Knoxville, Tennessee at the museum there among one of these collage organizations that does it annually, I think. And I've wondered about, you know, getting together with other collage artists. I know they're out there and I know some people really get into that kind of like communal thing. I would probably like it, but I'm also kind of pretty independent. So I would do it. I would drop in and taste it. And, you know, I should probably do more networking than I do with, you know, other artists. But yeah.
Yeah, the community on Instagram at least is pretty gigantic. I had no idea.
Yeah,
know,
same
and
here.
So it's really cool to connect with those people.
Yeah, I like it. You know, it's an international thing. People are doing this. You know, I don't have very many people liking or following me on Instagram, but often I will see people from like Eastern Europe and South America. And I love the fact that, you know, it is an international scene. And
All about the tags. You gotta tag your posts and like they
Right.
just people follow the tags, and because I don't know how I have as many followers as I do. I'm nobody. I'm not an artist. I'm just cutting out paper.
yeah, so anyways,
Jeff-
thanks you guys for the you know, having the show up and for chatting with me. It's always nice to talk about stuff that I do that I enjoy.
Well,
Thank
Jeff,
you.
you know, I always loved your work. So I was so pleased when you agreed to exhibit with us.
Well, you're welcome. And I guess I'll be seeing you in another month or a few weeks, whatever it is. Right?
Exactly. It is.
Few weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.